Today we're going to look at organization in biology, and we're also going to look at the properties of life. So one of the important questions we ask in biology is about life itself. Are things alive? How do we determine what is living and what is not? Some things are really easy. Obviously, we know that human beings are alive, but some things aren't as easy. What about bacteria? Are they classified as living? What about plants? Are plants alive? They definitely are alive, but they differ from humans. They differ from bacteria. So what are the unique properties that connect all living things? That's what we want to look at first. So biologists have come up with 7 properties of life. The first is order. All life is ordered. As you can see here with the sunflower, you can see the high level of organization here. All life must be ordered. Another property of life has to do with evolution. As you can see here in these pygmy sea dragons, they blend in very well with their background, with the coral behind them. And so this is an example of natural selection at work. The camouflage from these particular sea dragons has allowed them to blend in so well that predators can't see them, or they can also lure in prey to eat. So that brings us to our second property of life, which is evolutionary adaptation. The third property has to do with ability to respond to the environment. Whether you're a bacteria or the pygmy sea dragon, you must be able to respond to your environment. In this caption here, you see that there's a carnivorous plant eating an insect. Both the plant and the insect have to be able to respond to their environment to be classified as living things. We also see that living things use energy. The bird here that is taking the nectar from the plant is going to use that to break it down through the process of cellular respiration to get energy. So the use of energy, the processing of energy, is another property of life. This video here shows us our fifth property of life, and that is reproduction. Take a look here at the blue-footed boobies. These are particular birds that we find on the Galapagos Islands. The male is here on the right, and you can see he's going through an elaborate courtship ritual to try to lure the female. He, as you can see here, will move the feet up and down. There'll be some looking to the sky, also the show of the wings, all trying to lure the female for this courtship. So reproduction is essential for all living organisms. To be a living organism, you must reproduce or have the property of the ability to reproduce. Regulation is another property of life. All living things must be able to regulate their environment, their internal environment, by controlling temperature, by controlling blood sugar level. These are examples of something that you might have to regulate. Not all organisms regulate the same things, but the ability to regulate your environment is an essential property of life. And then finally, all living things grow. They develop over time. Growth and development is the 7th property of life. So now that we have all these properties of life, we know what things are living, we want to be able to classify them. We want to be able to group them starting from small to large. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at how life is organized. We're going to use a tree as our primary example. This will be the organism we talk about. We could go on the macro scale or the micro scale. We will start on the micro scale and work our way up. Notice that the tree, at its very basic structure, has atoms. Now, of course, in chemistry and physics, you'll learn that atoms are not the smallest, simplest structure, but for biologists, we're going to go with atoms. So atoms make up molecules, such as water, or you have the major macromolecules, proteins, nucleic acid, carbohydrates, and lipids. Those macromolecules and molecules make up organelles. As you can see here, a chloroplast. This chloroplast is an organelle that has a specific function, and it has a specific function in the cell. So all the organelles together make up a cell, In this case, you see a nice plant cell colored green from the chlorophyll. A group of cells that function together make up tissue. And whether you are a human being or a tree, you have tissue. In this case, it looks like we're probably looking at the mesophyll tissue layer from the leaf, which contains the cells that are photosynthetic. Well, groups of tissues make up organs. In this case, you have the tree leaf as the organ. If we're talking about humans, you could have the stomach, you could have the intestines, you could have the heart. The leaf is analogous to our organs, like the heart that we would have as human beings. Then a group of organs would make up an organ system. So this is probably making up part of the vascular system of the plant. The leaves are used for transpiration. And then all the organ systems together make up the organism. And the organism right here is this particular tree. If you have a population of these organisms together, that would be a population. A group of organisms of the same species living in the same place make up a population. Well, in this picture here, we have several populations together. We have populations of trees and bushes and grass, along with a population of deer. All the living populations together make up the community. If you include the other factors, such as temperature, precipitation, all of these abiotic, non-living factors added with the living factors make up the ecosystem. And there are several ecosystems on our planet, and the planet collectively we call the biosphere. So we have levels of organization, we have the properties of life. Now what we want to do is talk about how then we take particular organisms and group them together. These are grouped together in what we call the 3 domains of life. We start very simple with bacteria. These are things that you think of like E. coli, Streptococcus. This is what you think of when most people think of bacteria. This is its own domain. Then you have archaea, which we used to classify with bacteria, but as we do more genetic studies, we find that they're actually quite different. They have their own genes, different metabolic processes, so these evolved down a separate path. We also used to think that these only thrived in extreme conditions, but now we find that they're everywhere. They are very small microbes. They may look like bacteria, but they're actually very different. And then we fall into the 3rd domain, the domain Eukarya. As you see here, the domain Eukarya can be divided into several kingdoms. We are in the kingdom Animalia, animals. Plants are in kingdom Plantae, and the mushroom here that you see is in kingdom Fungi. The one that's a little different, as you see here, is protists. Protists we used to classify as kingdom Protista, but now we're finding out that protists are so vastly different from each other, they probably don't fit in one kingdom, and they will probably end up taking up several kingdoms or sub-kingdoms. Now, take a look at these 2 animals. We have the American black bear and a frog. Now, most people would understand that these are both animals, but how do we organize them? Do they have some similarities? How is this one different from here? What other animals are closely related to the bear and to the frog? So what we had to do is make a sense, or some sense, out of all of the diversity that we see in our animal kingdom, as well as all organisms on the planet. So we came up with, as scientists, a hierarchical scheme, a hierarchy that determines which animals are closely related to others and in which category they fall. So while these both are animals, we will notice that they are not that similar when we really break down their essential characteristics. So how we do this is by using this system here. You can see that this hierarchy is divided into domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Each animal is classified by their genus and species name. So you can see the American black bear that we were just looking at, Ursus americanus, actually is made of a genus and species name. This is the two naming system, or the binomial nomenclature, that we use to classify the American black bear. Now, if you continue going into this scheme, you'll notice that the domain is very inclusive. The American black bear is in the domain Eukarya, along with plants, butterflies, fungi, and the protists that you see down here. So this is a very wide ranging classification here, domain. Then as we move further in, it gets more specific. What kingdom is the black bear in? It's in kingdom Animalia. So notice we have removed the plant, the fungus, and the protist. Then we get a little more specific into the chordates, the phylum. Mammals, the bear is a mammal. It's carnivorous. And then you can see we're getting closer and closer to the family and genus of bears that you see here. The easiest way to remember these in order is to use an acronym. Dear King Paul cried out for good soup. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The easiest way to remember. So let me give you one more example of this, and that is with the gray wolf. You can see that as we go up, we get into smaller classifications. So this is the most inclusive, the kingdom, family, genus, species, least inclusive. So as you go up through the hierarchy, you will see we're getting more and more specific to the individual animal. It's important to remember several things from this video, specifically the hierarchy as well as the properties that make things living.